I'm the executive producer of the Epstein, Devil in the Darkness podcast, and have investigated Jeffrey Epstein for years. AMA. My lawyer friend and Nick called Epstein's death the biggest flex of the government and wealthy class he's ever seen. What is happening to understand what happened at that federal facility? Of course Jen William Barr says they're investigating, but anyone who follows this case knows you can't always take the government's word for it. As part of our own independent process to try to understand what happened, we actually found and interviewed someone who witnessed Epstein's first suicide attempt inside the MCC. We'll air that interview in an upcoming episode, and when you hear it, I think it will definitely give you greater insight into exactly what happened. Do we expect to hear of any prominent people getting prosecuted, or will most be protected? More prominent people will be prosecuted. The Aosta's office for the Southern District of New York has historically been able to rise above bureaucratic bullshit in service to the truth. In this case, they were able to get as far as they did with Epstein. Insiders close to the case tell us they are focused on getting co-conspirators. I'm not saying we can trust the system to get them locked away forever, but this investigation isn't over. What is the most alarming discovery for you in all of your years in researching him? Overall, the most astonishing discovery throughout the whole process of investigating this has been how deeply and extensively it was hidden from the public. As my team began doing new reporting for the podcast, I was so stunned to find how even almost 6 years after beginning my reporting into all things Epstein, there were still videos, documents, witnesses that I had never been able to uncover before. The depth of the rot is so extensive. That's what's so alarming to me. Overall, this is probably the most disturbing story I have ever covered, and it's the one that has been the most challenging to untangle because it's been buried so deep. On top of that, it's alarming that so many people find it so easy to move on to the next blip in the news cycle. Back in 2014-2015, it was so hard to find a receptive audience for the totally jaw-dropping things we were exposing. And now, we're not even 2 months past Epstein's suicide and it's already quieted down in terms of wider media coverage. In terms of an actual fact or incident that I found most alarming, it was probably watching the victim interview videos that we were able to obtain from the Palm Beach police. Even after reporting on this for years, actually hearing the girls' voices from back then and seeing how young they were added an entirely new layer of heartbreak to this. We're playing audio from a bunch of those videos on next week's episode. Listening to it will really remind everyone what's actually at stake underneath all of the intrigue. Where in the world is Ghislaine Maxwell? What was that photo with the CIA book all about? If I had to guess, I would say that Ghislaine Maxwell is in Israel or on a yacht somewhere. Given her dad's ties, it would be easy to disappear with the help of the former. I believe the in-and-out picture was definitely staged, and the CIA book was a big FU. The main clue, according to one of her family friends, was that she was photographed with so much junk food and she was always on a strict diet. Since you're paying closer attention than most of us, and you brought it up in your introduction above, what do you have to say about Epstein's reported suicide? She's not touching that one with a 10-foot length of sheets tied together. I'll go there. And if I turn up dead in the next few weeks, you all can avenge me. This would be a good time to note that everything I'm saying here is my opinion and not the beliefs of my employers or business partners, etc etc. So pretty much every single person we have talked to believes it was not a suicide. At this point, I agree. First, I do not think that suicide fits with Epstein's character. He always believed he was above the law, and death is the ultimate justice that no one can escape. I find it hard to believe he'd submit to that willingly. Yes, he would be escaping the legal system in doing so, but there are other ways to do that. Second, I believe that the Occam's razor in this case points to hit. Suicide is not the easiest explanation. How did someone who'd supposedly tried to kill themselves just days before get the time and space to go through with it? Why were the security cameras malfunctioning? Why did the guards skip their check-ins? There are too many unexplained variables for a simple suicide, I believe. In our reporting for the podcast, We actually found and talked to a man who was in a cell across from Epstein's the night of his first suicide attempt and witnessed it all. We'll play that interview in an upcoming episode. He has a lot to say about how the guards treated Epstein, and that has definitely influenced my thinking. And in future episodes, we'll get much deeper into the blackmail tapes, the Mossad question, and other variables that definitely problematize the suicide verdict. Definitely keep listening to hear more of that. I'm so confounded as to why there isn't an absolute army of investigative journalists covering this. What are the barriers? I have felt this way for years. The simple answer is, it's hard, and a lot of journos are lazy. Myself included at times. First, it's hard because this case has been so buried. When I first started reporting this case in 2014-2015, the authorities in FL made a simple records request a total nightmare, giving me the runaround for years. The FBI actually has those records, why don't you ask them? They said we have the records? Oh wait, we do have those records but they washed away in a hurricane, etc etc. You might have seen that American media actually had to sue the FBI at one point to try to get at the files. In cases like this, making a few phone calls won't cut it. Our reporter Marjorie Hernandez hounded the authorities in PB for months to get the victim interview footage you hear in our next episode. And we actually sent a reporter out to New Mexico to dig into the Zorro Ranch compound. To my knowledge, no one else has devoted the time or resources there that we did. When she met former employees there, they told her that they'd all had to sign confidentiality agreements. It took a lot of great work by our reporter Katie Forrester to help them feel comfortable speaking out. That leads me to the second point. It's hard because everyone involved is so scared. Almost everyone close to the case has been scared for decades. Of Epstein, of his powerful friends, of the authorities, etc. Some of these people have obviously felt emboldened by his death, but the reality is that his power lives on in his co-conspirators. When we spoke to Epstein's former chauffeur for the podcast, for example, he insisted on conditions of anonymity because he is still afraid for his life. It takes a lot of work on our reporting team's part to help people feel safe in this process, and it takes a lot of courage on behalf of the sources to decide this story is important enough to go and risk everything. The team I work with has never been afraid of hard work. We get fired up when someone tells us no comment, or the records aren't available. We think this story is worth the effort. How do we find other people, or groups, doing things like Epstein was? What warning signs did we as citizens miss, and how can we identify this sort of activity in our own universes? A lot of people we interviewed said they saw things but assumed it wasn't as bad as it looked. It was easy to look the other way. Don't assume. Try not to be awed by wealth and power. Question official reports. Don't just trust the government to find the truth and protect you. Why did you consider investigating Epstein? Hi everyone. Thanks for joining. This is probably a good place to start. I began my career as an investigative journalist in 2007, almost straight out of college, working at a tabloid. My dad was an FBI agent, and I loved digging around to find the truth that celebrities and power players tried so hard to hide. Honestly, I never heard anything about Epstein until the victims' rights case was filed in FL in 2014, and when we started to get court documents out of that case and the subsequent Virginia Roberts Giuffre case, I was totally blown away, wondering one, why wasn't this a bigger story the first time around, and two, why weren't more people covering this? I still feel really driven to expose the truth of this story because it is so massive, so disturbing, and so many people are still ignoring it, wishing it would be swept under the rug. Overall, the case, and its coverage, says a lot about the dark side of our society as a whole. It's so important, even beyond Epstein and his co-conspirators. How on earth have Prince Andrew and Gizlane been able to walk around without repercussions? How are they being protected? Great question. I think Gizlane disappeared, but Prince Andrew is very interesting to me. How is he completely unscathed and no one seems to dig into his involvement further? Do British royalty just universally get a free pass from scrutiny on stuff like this? Or has the British govt severely restricted access to him from foreign reporters and investigators, etc.? Is he out and about, or has he shut himself in a castle somewhere? Prince Andrew and Gizlane obviously deny they've done anything wrong. Legal disclaimer necessary, but international intelligence and British aristocracy certainly can help people hide, if they have a reason to. I think prosecutors are focusing first on easier targets in the US. Do you think Epstein was foreign intelligence? We split hairs on this a lot. Was he foreign intelligence, a spy, an asset, or part of a honey trap with Gizlane? The more we report on it, the more I'm sure that it was some combination of those. We started getting into this in our special episode with John Mark Duggan, but there's a lot more to come in upcoming episodes. No one would amass all of that documentation for their own personal spank bank. What, in your estimation, is the goal of Epstein's activities? Is the main point human trafficking and pedophilia, or is that a means to exert more pressure on other activities, such as espionage and extortion? The more that we learn, the more it seems clear that the goal was not human trafficking and pedophilia. I saw inside his New York home, and he had professional grade printers everywhere. Feds found dozens of photos in his safe. You wouldn't need to collect all of that material if it was just for your own personal enjoyment. Your dad works for the FBI? Did he try to convince you to leave this alone? He did, but he died under mysterious circumstances in 2003. That's for another podcast. Do you believe we will see any kind of justice come from this cluster that has happened? Epstein must have had many accomplices. We have heard from sources inside the NY investigation that it certainly has not slowed since Epstein's death, and they are intent on getting the co-conspirators. Honestly, I think they are probably a little hissed about what happened with the suicide and how higher powers might have allowed it to take place. I'm also really intrigued about the Paris investigation, and what will come from that. We have directed resources to Europe in recent weeks due to that development. Any of us reporting on this have to believe that justice will be served, in order to do what we do. If only in the sense that the truth will be revealed. I don't hold any faith that co-conspirators will end up locked away and rotting in prison, for sure. But every time we talk to a victim or former accomplice who shares new information publicly, every time we find new documents and materials that have been buried for decades, it feels like a little bit of justice. The people involved certainly don't fear the rule of law, but they do fear the truth. What has been the most surprising reveal in your investigation so far? I love the real-time element of the series. What other targets do you have lined up? My favorite reveal of the series so far was from Epstein's New Mexico massage therapist recruiter, who told us about her weekend on the property with Prince Andrew and a young woman, not Virginia Roberts Giuffre. We had that in the bank right about the time he released his most recent denial, and if you listen to yesterday's episode, it definitely adds another level of questions about what he might have known. It was really important to me and the team to send a reporter out to New Mexico, because it's been pretty undercovered throughout the years. Obviously everyone knows about the NY and PB homes, but Katie Forrester found so much more out in the desert. In terms of future reporting, we have a reporter in Europe right now working on locating Gizlane, untangling Epstein's ties to British aristocracy, and digging into the Paris investigation. We also just wrapped an interview with one of Epstein's victims on Wednesday, and she gave us the names of some other never before revealed co-conspirators that we are now hunting. It's common knowledge that Gizlane and her sisters still rub elbows with Israeli intelligence. Gizlane herself is probably Mossad, or at least worked as JE's handler. Do you really think they'll allow your journalist anywhere near her? If you're talking about Laura Goldman from the podcast, she is a journalist in general, but did not approach the Maxwells in that way. She's a longtime friend of Isabel, and met her at an event in Israel. They're friends, not a reporter and a source. In terms of the reporter tracking her in Europe, we're not so much trying to find her by knocking on her door as to find other people and clues that will lead us to her, at this point. That's possible. Why do you think this was swept from the headlines so quickly and has seemingly become unimportant as far as current events are concerned? Or better yet, WHO is keeping it down? The 24/7 news cycle is always looking for the next storyline and the next hit of dopamine, unfortunately. I don't think anyone is overtly telling outlets not to cover it. Like I said before, it's a tricky story to report on, and it's easier for some people to just bang out an outraged article on the president's tweets. I'm interested in seeing, however, how the current big stories might end up being connected to Epstein. Hi Melissa, how big is the operation working on the podcast? Do you have a dedicated team actively investigating writing in real time as things develop? This is a great one because our team is so awesome. All of us have reported on Epstein for years, but when we decided to do the podcast, we fired up a whole new round of dedicated effort to tell this story once and for all. That dedication to real-time reporting, combined with our history and experience reporting this case, is what sets us apart from other podcasts. We sent one reporter, Katie Forrester, out to New Mexico at the start to talk to employees of Epstein's Zorro Ranch. One employee told us about Prince Andrew's secret visit, which is in this week's episode. Our reporter Doug Montero was just down in Palm Beach last week working on some new on-the-ground reporting. We have a reporter in the UK, Aaron Tinney, who has been working on the Maxwells and Epstein's business affairs. In New York, Andy Tillett got us Krilla material on Epstein's early days that you heard in episodes 1 and AMP 2. Out in LA, Jen Hager has been getting us updates from several victims' attorneys. Our justice reporter Marjorie Hernandez just flew out from LA to TN this week to interview a victim on film with our DP Jason Katz. James Robertson in NY took a weekend call to Duggan in Moscow, which you heard in our special episode. And while that's all happening, our script writer Dominic Hutton, production team Sean Kravitz, Sam Adder, and Tom Freestone and so many others are working on the final product. Our host Danielle Robert records in LA. My co-executive producer Dylan Howard is flying around the country meeting with other sources. It's a 24/7 operation to uncover the truth, and we all love it. We are sharing the results of that work with our listeners in breaking news special episodes, like the Duggan one on the blackmail tapes posted last week. We'll have a new one coming up soon. Do you think that the buck really stopped with Alex Acosta, or were there other people higher than him that authored the non-prosecution agreement? I 100% don't think it ended with Alex Acosta. No offense to him, but I personally don't see him as a brilliant power player. All signs point to other players being involved. Immo. Before researching Epstein, was there something you thought that was true about him that you later realized to be false? In the beginning, I thought he was actually a legit genius billionaire. One of the most interesting things about this case has been finding out that everyone secretly thought he was kind of dumb, and that he didn't actually make his millions the usual way on Wall Street. Do you think anyone involved in this deep web of fuckery will ever be held legitimately accountable? The whole thing makes me bummed as hell, and the feeling of I guess if you're rich enough you can get away with f***ing children is incredibly depressing and disheartening. It depends what you think holding someone accountable is. Do I think they'll all go to jail? No. But do I think they could be exposed and lose their businesses, social standing, and/or political office as a result? Definitely. The second scenario might be worse to some of these people. What are your thoughts on the abysmal coverage by the British media of Prince Andrew's connection part in his dead BFF's hobbies? It seems like the majority of the media out there prefer to focus on any missteps by the Sussexes, real or imagined, rather than a royal prince's unseemly ties to a convicted paedophile rapist. Do you think Virginia Gifford and her fellow survivors will ever see any sort of justice? The reality is that the British media often depends on cooperation from the royals to get coverage. Some outlets like The Sun, who did a great story on Andrew today, take a more antagonistic standpoint. The Times of London has done great reporting above the fray on Epstein's blackmail material on Andrew and why MI6 is involved. In the UK, it's much easier to sue for libel than it is in the US, so they can be a lot more wary about going up against big targets. In the US, we are certainly not stopping, though. What kind of roadblocks have you hit during your investigation? The most significant roadblocks have been lack of cooperation from the authorities and the system of intimidation and fear perpetrated by Epstein and his co-conspirators. I got deeper into this in another answer, but it's been so hard to get documents out of the official agencies. And it's been understandably difficult for people involved with the case to feel safe enough to speak out about this. Epstein made covering his tracks a full-time job for decades, so it hasn't been surprising that this is one of the harder cases to crack. It makes all of what we've found that much more exciting to us. Why do you think Wexner never reported that Jeffrey Epstein stole millions and millions of dollars from him until recently? Rich people don't report stuff like that because it's incredibly humiliating. We saw this with Madoff. They want their friends to think they're biz geniuses, and saying they were duped is embarrassing. Given Wexner's position, it also could have given his shareholders pause and affected his position at the Limited, if he was so easily bamboozled. Was Epstein a big fish or a little fish in all this? You think there were people giving Epstein direct orders? Is it possible the person above him is walking around in plain sight, kind of like when Epstein would just go to parties casually with stars? Definitely a small fish. Everyone who we talked to that had met him said Epstein was kind of an airhead. One that caught a lucky break, unfortunately. I don't really think we'll get all the way to the top in my lifetime, unfortunately, but more rungs on the ladder are going to be revealed. Do you have the autopsy report? The news indicated multiple broken bones in his neck. They kept harping on just the hyoid bone, but if he had any cervical vertebrae broken as well, that's the much bigger story. We have a reporter working with a source close to the family to get it. This was actually really interesting. NY medical examiner released the death certificate before giving an autopsy report to the family. That was super unusual. The family was entitled to an autopsy before the results went public. In the weeks after the death announcement, Epstein's family was calling them almost every day to get the official autopsy, and they kept getting put off. Eventually sources said that it did show broken bones in his neck. How did you get invited inside the mansion? What did you see? What types of threats opposition have you faced during your investigation? Do you have archives of Larry Visocki, Nadia Marcinko, Sarah Vickers, or other associates' social media like Instagram? Hi. I saw inside the mansion, but I did not go inside it. I describe it in the podcast, but on the surface it just looks like a really gaudy rich person palace. The disturbing Epstein touches were a professional grade printer, 6 monitors in a security room showing activity all over the house, what appeared to be a camera on the toilet, a massive massage room pleasure palace with a shower with 4 shower heads, a jacuzzi in the wall, etc. Photos of Epstein with world leaders like Bill Clinton and Prince Andrew, and a giant photograph of Epstein carrying an unidentified young, 5-6 years oldish, blonde girl on his shoulders, grinning.